That's Carla and James there from the BBC Radio Bristol team taking a look at Online Safety Act. Lucy Smith is from the Bristol-based Inclusive Change, an organisation that supports parents and young people, and she is here with her 17-year-old son Tom. Good morning to you both and thanks for coming in.
Good morning.
Listen, you've done loads of work with parents and kids around online safety. What are the biggest issues, Lucy?
I think a lot of it, and particularly we talk about teenagers, and one of the biggest things we've found is around well-being, okay, and staying safe online and managing your mental health whilst being online. And so for us as a family in particular, being online can really, really significantly damage your mental health. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing with young people in that digital sphere.
Talk to us about the kind of impact then that has on young people and indeed their families.
So we were listening to some of the clips there earlier, and one of the reasons I do what I do at Inclusive Change and Inclusive Change at Work is because Molly Russell took her own life at the age of 14. And my own daughter, who is still alive but isn't with us today, she got herself caught up in that kind of world of being online, the algorithm sending you further and deeper down into things that make you feel even worse about yourself.
Sure.
So it's very easy for young people to find something online that takes them from, hey, I'm just having a look at these images, to, hey, there's a pro-anorexia or a pro-suicide site that they're getting clicks taken to. And as young people, our brains don't form until we're about 25 years old, right?
And as parents, we've got no idea, because you want to give your kids a longer leash, because of course as they're straddling the world of adolescence, moving into adulthood, they have to have their own time to be able to grow.
Absolutely. And part of the digital world is exactly part of that. What we've actually found at Inclusive Change at Work, though, we're creating a podcast series at the moment called Scam Me, and we're working with neurodivergent, in particular, young people and disabled young people to explore and talk to them and ask their voices, ask them to tell in their voices what it's like being online and what they find scary, don't find scary. Without exception, most of them said, we don't like being online. We don't like this stuff. But sometimes we don't know how to have conversations about keeping yourself safe and working out what's right, what's wrong, and what's on there. And Tom, in particular, we chat about what would he do if he had a child? Would he allow them to have a phone when they were young?
Let's talk about it. Tom, what is your experience? I mean, you've grown up your entire life online. You're 17 years old now. What's your life been like being online?
I mean, obviously I've grown up with the internet, being born in 2008, with the kind of rise of social media and whatnot. I think it's great in many ways, but there's also many detrimental side effects from it. Like, obviously it's great to be in the loop and be able to communicate well with people, but I think it's also very bad for your mental health, and there's many rabbit holes online that people can fall down.
What would your advice be, I suppose, to us, the parents, in terms of how to look after people, in order to look after our kids or our grandkids or the people that we care for and their mental well-being?
I mean, I think you just really need to know what's around on the internet, and you need to be careful around it. And
but you don't want your mum like breathing over your shoulder or whatever, looking down and just saying what you're looking at exactly all the time.
I do.
Yeah, you're a man. You want to have your own autonomy to make these kind of decisions. So what can we do to kind of facilitate that, to be able to give you enough room to be able to grow, but at the same time make sure that you're safe and you're happy?
I mean, I think it's just like I said, you need to know what's around, and you need to be able to have safe conversations about that. Because if you just place, for example, parental locks in place, there's always ways to get around that kind of thing.
Well, you know more than us about how to get around those things, I'd imagine. That's the trouble with the digital world as well, because we're not used to it and you are. So, where there's a scheme, there's a schemer. There's always a way around it.
Always. And I think Tom's right. Being able to have conversations offline, particularly with your teenagers, but not necessarily talking about, oh, that's bad, oh, that's awful, you're not allowed to look at it. But more having a conversation about why is that okay? Why is that? What's wrong with that? Let's have that discussion and conversation and actually talk about these things in a wider context offline.
Does it involve a level of candour in terms of talking to your young people that like maybe you didn't have with your parents and parents didn't have with their grandparents?
Yes. Yeah. I think I'm fortunate I did have that candour, and I did have that my mum talked about things with me at a very young age, and I was born in an analogue age, all right? I call it the analog age. Didn't have to worry about the digital world. But there were magazines. Back in the day, you and me would have gone to a newsagent and there would have been stuff on a top shelf that we wouldn't have been able to look at, we wouldn't have been able to touch, we shouldn't have been able to buy.
Or you find it in a bush, weirdly.
You would have found it in a bush. Who knew this conversation was going to go down? But nowadays, it's in the palm of your hand. It's on your laptop. It's there in our world, in our face, with no barriers at all.
That's the thing. I mean, having conversations, candid conversations about your young people, with your young people, about pornography, about violence, about drugs, and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, when do you start that? And where's the tipping point? Because you want your kids to be kids and enjoy the innocence of youth, but at some point they need to, need to get battle ready for the adult world ahead of them.
I think that's the word. And this time last year, we ran a conference called the Digital Wellbeing Conference.
Yeah.
And we were talking to teachers at schools, at primary schools, who were telling us that their children, their pupils who were 6, 7, 8 years old were coming into the classroom, coming into school, talking about those kind of topics. They have seen porn online at that young age. Wow. So I'm very, very strong and very sorry to have to say we've got to talk about it as early as possible in an age appropriate way. Of
course.
We don't just go straight in there and talk about, everything.
Yeah.
But in an age appropriate way. Sometimes some things online are not ready for it, young people are just not ready for yet, and it's not okay.
Because your daughter Lucy, she's actually given up social media altogether, hasn't she?
Yeah, Owen. Owen. She gave up her smartphone when she was 15 years old. It made her depressed. It was a pretty difficult time for her, and she would spend 8 to 10 hours a day on her phone, and it would just fuel her depression. She'd be doing things like looking up how many calories in 10 grapes. She got to 15 and she said, "Please take my phone away."
Yeah.
Take it. We didn't make that happen. But since then, she's now nearly 19. She is the happiest person. She has a phone, doesn't she, Tom?
Yeah, but she uses it in a very different way.
Yeah.
Nowhere near like she used to.
What about you then, Tom? What's your relationship like with social media?
If you don't have it, it feels like you're a bit left out of the loop.
Yeah, of course.
So it's really hard to keep in contact with people without it, but I would rather not have it. I went without it during the period of my GCSEs because it was easier to stay focused on revision and whatnot. But afterwards, it's really hard to keep in contact with people. But I think social media is just very addictive, and it's mostly bad for your health. But yeah.
I mean, the addiction is there for all to see. We as adults are definitely consumed by content and all that kind of thing. And for young people, I just can't imagine what that's going to be like, because there's a lot more kind of bullying that happens online and things like that. There were people that were saying earlier on that people feel emboldened to say things on social media that they wouldn't dream to say to somebody in real life. Do you think that that's true?
Yeah, 100%, definitely. People are much more confident behind a mask of a screen than in real life.
Tell me about have you guys watched Adolescence? Did you watch it together? And what are your thoughts and feelings about a show like that?
We watched it. So Tom is training to be an actor, and we watched it because
good lad. Maybe I'll play your dad one day.
We wanted to see the filmmaking and the craft and all of that kind of stuff. But then we ended up talking about the content. And for me, it kind of started a great conversation with a lot of different people. But between us, we started having conversations about, well, is that really happening? What are girls having to experience? What are boys having to experience at school? And we've had those chats, haven't we?
I think it's so important. I mean, for me, where do you think that, if you're saying, go and watch Adolescence, EastEnders are doing something right now. One of the teenagers, Joel, has been filming, sharing a video of without consent, of himself sleeping with a girl. Do you think the fact that soaps are dealing with content like this really helps to start exploring a conversation?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, because that does happen a lot in real life, all throughout secondary schools.
Yeah, I mean, I work with a lot of parenting carers across the country, and when Adolescence came out, I was having a conversation in another part of the country, and we were talking about adolescence, but another parent came in and then told us a story about something that had just happened to their son, almost exactly what had happened in adolescence around things being shared. This is happening in real life, and if the soaps... Right, Tom isn't going to watch the soap. Tom doesn't watch it. You don't watch EastEnders, do you?
I don't.
No,
no.
But I do. But I do, and it means as an adult, as a parent, I can start thinking about those things and have those conversations with my kids if I get the right guidance to do that. Because it is hard to have those conversations.
Listen, we can only do it together, and this is why we're having these conversations today. Tell us about inclusive change, how we can get involved with inclusive change. Is there a website? Is there someone we can go and get hold of you to find out more?
Yeah, so if you look up inclusivechange.co.uk, you will find us online. So that's our website. We also run Inclusive Change at Work, a community interest company. But the easiest way to find us is to look up Lucy Smith or inclusivechange.co.uk.
Guys, thank you so much for coming in. That is Lucy Smith from Bristol-based Inclusive Change, an organisation that supports parents and young people, and a brilliant son, Tom, who we're going to see on stage and on set very soon, no doubt, on online safety for younger people. We got loads more about this during the day right here on BBC Radio Bristol. There's also a Points West special programme that you're definitely going to want to see at 6:30 p.m.